Good morning and welcome everyone. I am Angelica Migliorisi. I'm an Italian journalist with Il Sole 24 Ore covering European policy, innovation and industry. Let me say that for me it's a great pleasure to be here today to moderate this fundamental event, Regulation, Safety and Competitiveness, ECHA's role in European industry and environment. And allow me to thank Mr. Pietro Fiocchi for organizing such an important event, especially in this significant moment in history. Thank you so much. Well, our objective today is to better understand European Chemicals Agency's role in chemical regulation and obviously how the dialogue between European Commission, the agency and the chemical industry has in some way shaped Europe's approach to safety, competitiveness and innovation. We will explore three major areas that define today this special relationship: the REACH regulation, its upcoming revision, the CLP regulation and its implications for classification and labeling, and finally, the proposed PFAS revision, which is, as we know, one of the most debated issues in EU chemical policy. So let's begin with our institutional greetings. It's my pleasure to first give the floor to Mr. Pietro Fiocchi, member of the European Parliament and EP point of contact with the European Chemicals Agency.
Now, first of all, I bring the salute from the Italian Minister of Industry, Adolfo Urso, that stressed the incredible challenge of the European chemical industry that lost over 50% in the last 22 years of the world market. And this is quite a strong data. And the Minister also totally supportive to the Commission proposal to an ambitious plan to simplification of bureaucracy and rules that could, according to his calculations, save up to 360 million euros per year. For him, simplification and a clear juridical situation is a key move to attract industrial investments in our continent, and he also stresses the strategic role of this action in order to reduce our dependence from uncontrollable countries, and I do not make any names, but China and so on. I also bring the salute of the Italian Minister of Environment, Gilberto Bicchetto Frattin, that while recognizing the fundamental role of ECHA in reducing negative impacts on the environment and human health, he also stresses the need to sustain and reinforce the competitiveness of the European industry through simplification and the strong use of scientific arguments. Last, I bring the salute of the Italian Health Minister, Orazio Schillaci, who underlines the essential role of ECHA in reducing the negative effect of chemicals in human health, but he also stresses the essential use of some chemicals in medical devices and medicine, and the word PFAS comes to mind since they're heavily used in medical devices and in medicines, and therefore asking for a pragmatic approach to the system. And of course, I salute, which she swore that she's going to come to salute, Commissioner Roswell, but when she will come, we'll give her the word. And of course, Director Sharon McGuinness, and which I appreciate incredibly for spending the time to come to this event, and all our staff, and all my colleagues, and all the representatives of the industry. And this is a topic which is strategic for Europe. Okay, most of my colleagues are not aware of the system, do not know the functioning of ECHA. I do understand that it's quite a complex topic, but it is essential and strategic that we take the correct decision for the future of Europe and also of the planet. So there I stop and go back to
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Fiocchi. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank MEP Dimitri Tsiodras. Okay, thank you for who has just joined us. Thank you so much. Welcome. And let's move on now. Please welcome Dr. Sharon McGuinness, Executive Director of the European Chemicals Agency, for her opening remarks.
Good morning, everyone. Dear honourable members of the European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be here today to speak on behalf of the European Chemicals Agency, ECHA. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to MEP Pietro Fiocchi, under whose initiative we have gathered here today to learn more about the chemical regime in Europe and also ECHA's role in it. We are very grateful for the opportunity to engage in this important dialogue on regulation, safety and competitiveness, underpinning not only our work at ECHA, but the broader European vision for a sustainable and resilient chemical sector. ECHA was originally established by the REACH regulation in 2007 to implement the then EU's chemicals legislation, and to do so with scientific integrity, transparency, and a strong commitment to protection of health and the environment. This continues to be our driver today. While working to ensure that the chemicals placed on the European market are safe and used safely, we've also since helped ensure that the EU's regulatory framework supports not only protection, but also innovation and competitiveness. ECHA is very much about implementation. It is a key player in the system that turns policy into practice, but it is not a policy-making body. We provide scientific and technical support to the Commission, and we work closely with member states, industry, and civil society to ensure that regulation works in practice and the legislation is implemented effectively and as efficiently as possible. Chemicals play an important role in everyday life and for Europe's industry. Accordingly, it is an important consideration for all policymakers. Initially, the Chemical Strategy for Sustainability placed chemical safety at the heart of the European Green Deal. Later on, we've seen further efforts to bridge protecting health and the environment with strengthening the resilience of the European chemicals industry to tackle high energy prices, unfair global competition and administrative burden. The upcoming revision of REACH, the evolution of the classification, labelling and packaging regulation, and the growing attention to substances of concern such as PFAS all reflect a shared ambition. We need to modernise our regulatory system to protect people and the environment, respond to emerging risks, and to ensure that Europe remains a global leader in chemical safety and innovation. And an important part of this modernisation for ECHA will be our future basic regulation. ECHA is proud to contribute to European efforts for chemical safety. We act not just as a regulator, we are a scientific hub and a data steward as we host the world's largest chemicals database, and we manage complex regulatory processes while facilitating dialogue across sectors and borders. Today's event is an opportunity to reflect on how far we've come together and to consider how we can continue to improve. It is also a chance to reaffirm the importance of collaboration between institutions, between regulators and industry, and between regulatory science and policy. ECHA remains committed to supporting the European institutions in building a chemicals framework that is protective, predictable, and future-proof, and even more so, effectively implementable and enforceable. I look forward to the discussions ahead this morning. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. McGuinness, and thank you also to MEP Beatrice Timgren, who has just joined us. Thank you very much. Well, let's move on. We'll now move to our first panel, which is focused on the REACH regulation, which is, as we know, the cornerstone of EU chemical regulations. So REACH stands for registration, evaluation, authorization, and restriction of chemicals. And let me say that it has fundamentally changed how Europe handles chemical substances throughout their entire lifetime, so from production to disposal. And as we await the Commission's forthcoming proposal for its revision expected in early 2026, I think that this is the right moment to think, to reflect on what works, what doesn't, and what lies ahead. So I'm very pleased to welcome our two speakers. Again, Dr. McGuinness, Sharon McGuinness, Executive Director of ECHA, and joining us remotely, Mr. Francesco Buzzella, President of Federchimica, representing the industrial perspective. Each speaker will have about 10 minutes for her and his speech. And Dr. McGuinness, the floor is yours.
Thank you again. And delighted, as I said earlier, for the opportunity to speak more about REACH, which is, as we all recognize, the cornerstone of Europe's chemicals legislation, and a regulation that I think has fundamentally changed how chemicals are managed across the EU. So the implementation of REACH is the first and the most substantial part of ECHA's mandate. During the last 2 decades, we've gained multiple other tasks through different legislation such as CLP, biocides, POPs, PIC, batteries, and so forth, but REACH still covers a clear majority of our work. ECHA manages the registration of substances, evaluates dossiers, supports restriction and authorization processes, and provides guidance and tools to help companies comply. We also maintain the REACH data, hosting the largest database of its kind globally, providing a vital source for regulators, researchers, and industry alike. We have now almost 20 years' experience in implementing REACH. We know that it has increased considerably the amount of safety data available on chemicals used in Europe. It has driven substitution of hazardous substances, promoted safer alternatives, and improved communication along the supply chains. It has also contributed to creating a level playing field, ensuring that all companies, regardless of size or origin, meet the same standards when placing chemicals on the European market. But we also recognize that the implementation of REACH is not without its challenges. One of the most persistent issues is the quality of registration dossiers. Despite clear requirements, many dossiers still lack sufficient data or fail to meet the set standards. This undermines the effectiveness of the system and places a burden on authorities to fill gaps that should be addressed by registrants. We have made significant efforts to improve dossier quality. We conduct compliance checks, publish recommendations, and engage with industry to promote better practices. But this is an area where further progress is needed. Another challenge is the complexity of the regulation. REACH is demanding, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises. We recognize this, and we continue to develop tools, guidance, and support mechanisms to help companies navigate the system. Our goal is to make compliance achievable without compromising on safety. We also see opportunities. Digitalization is transforming how we work. We are investing in IT systems that can make data more accessible, processes more efficient, and decisions more transparent. We are exploring ways to use artificial intelligence and data analytics to better support our work, also in risk assessment and regulatory action. Looking ahead, we support the European efforts to reduce administrative burden and foster competitiveness while maintaining high standards for health and the environment. I will leave it up to my Commission colleagues, however, to comment on how this will shape the future of the REACH regulation. We stand ready in the agency to support the legislative process with our scientific, technical expertise, our stakeholder networks, and our implementation experience of almost 20 years. We are committed to ensuring a future-proof regulatory landscape that benefits people, industry, and the environment in a balanced way. This includes safeguarding the level playing field for the EU chemicals industry and its downstream users. We want to see laws that are implementable by all actors, remain science and evidence-based, and provide predictability for industry and authorities alike. We know that resources in industry and authorities are scarce, so we call for coordinated, early, and effective planning mechanisms for regulatory action, in line with the one substance, one assessment principle, so that limited resources can be focused on the right priorities, particularly underscored by the current resource and time-intensive approach to risk assessment. In our experience, next reducing administrative burden, enforcement of chemicals regulations is another significant opportunity to boost competitiveness and of the chemicals industry. This includes ensuring all parties comply with the regulation and that enforcement actions are effective and consistent across the EU. ECHA is not in the lead in this regard, but we do have effective tools to support the member states, for example, through our Forum on Enforcement. ECHA is continuously reviewing its processes to identify simplification and streamlining opportunities and to reduce administrative burden on industry. Experience shows that results improve if we increase pragmatism, simplify our ways of working, speed up the protection of people and the environment, and ensure more predictability for industry, and allow for a better use of the resources of regulators at EU and member state level. For ECHA, an important avenue to future-proof our own ways of working will be our future basic regulation, which we hope will consolidate our mandate, streamlining our resources, and improve our governance. We look forward to working with the European Parliament as this file moves forward. ECHA remains committed to supporting European ambition for chemical safety, including during the preparation of the REACH revision. Our focus remains on making REACH work in practice, ensuring that it does deliver on its objectives, that it is enforceable, and that it continues to serve as a model for chemicals regulation worldwide. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. McGuinness. And now we'll turn to Dr. Buzzella, joining us remotely. Mr. Buzzella, please go ahead.
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to share, as President of Federchimica, the Italian chemical industry viewpoint and experience on such a fundamental chemical policy for our activities. First of all, I would like to apologize for not being able to attend in person, but I've been held up here in Italy by previously taken institutional commitments. Getting now straight to the point of this morning debate, our experience as chemical industry shows that REACH regulation has been successful in ensuring a high level of protection for human health and environment. Also thanks to the level playing field processes that both producers and/or importers of chemical substances should apply when operating in Europe. However, we are here this morning also to highlight which are, in our view, the REACH critical aspects that failed to meet the initial uploadable scope, which was to represent not only a high protection safety tool, but also a strategic instrument to enhance the competitiveness and innovation of the European chemical industry. As an example, I would like to underline the complexity of the requested requirements of the REACH regulation, from registration to authorization or restriction processes. Testing, data collection, and dossiers preparation entail major financial investments and technical resources. For small and medium-sized enterprises, which in Italy represent 70% of the chemical companies and the strategic engine for our economy, this can be particularly burdensome. In many cases, significant investments, both in terms of economic and human resources, had to be reallocated from research and innovation into regulatory compliance activities. In some cases, companies had to review their products portfolios and withdraw some products, when considered no longer economically viable to continue their production, and also in many cases slow down the development of new products. When this occurred, the impact through the supply chain was very relevant, as it happened in Italy, a country which is leader of tailor-made fine chemicals, substances that are developed often for specific sectors such as textile, leather, just to mention few of them, which are at the base of the well-known Made in Italy. Looking at the future, the areas that, in our view, should be deeply evaluated are: first, create a regulatory framework for chemicals based on scientific evidence and on a risk assessment approach. We recommend, therefore, avoiding simplistic assessments such as the use of generic risk approach, which is based only on hazard classification or chemical structure familiarities. This will help to prevent the possible unnecessary restriction of hundreds or even thousands of substances grouped together, neglecting their chemical physical diversity, the variety of their applications, and the different benefits of each individual substance. Second, simplify procedures and data requests. Simplification for us means making regulations more effective. Reduce unnecessary burdens while ensuring regulations achieve their intended goals. In line with the EU's commitment to restore competitiveness, the announced REACH revision must build on a stress test of the EU acquis. It should cut complexity, improve implementation, reduce costs, and strengthen Europe's industrial base and strategic resilience. Third, in line with what just said, develop robust ex-ante and ex-post impact assessments for each of new and relevant chemicals policy proposal. As an example, the REACH Polymers Registration Initiative will have a significant impact, particularly on small and medium-sized enterprises. In this case, we think that the best way forward would be, to begin with, to identify if there are real gaps in the current legislation which require a change so impactful of REACH regulation, and only afterwards to consider which are the adequate measures to address this concern. Improving current monomer registration process or considering a simplified notification instead of a registration should be deeply evaluated. I would like to thank Mr. Fiocchi, Vice Chair of the ENVI Committee, for having organized such a fruitful debate, as well as Dr. Sharon McGuinness for the open discussion. As President of Federchimica, I wish that the dialogue among European national authorities and industry will continue in the future to pursue the common interest to ensure the highest protection of human health and the environment, whilst preserving prosperous and competitive European chemical industry for the welfare of all citizens and the generation to come. To conclude, I would like to inform you that as further evidence of the importance of the PFAS issue to be addressed during this event, Federchimica has organized a dinner debate next Tuesday, 21st of October, at the European Parliament in Strasbourg. The initiative, dedicated to Italian members of Parliament, aims to foster informed dialogue and constructive discussion on this topic. I wish you all productive continuation of the work of the day. Thank you.
Since I organized the event, I can jump in when I want. So, no, going around in Europe regarding REACH, I have 3 picks which comes up very often. I do realize that my friend Sharon cannot answer to this because this would be more questions for the Commission than for ECHA. But number one, simplification. What does the Commission mean by simplification? If simplification means that a company has an easier way to go through with a chemical substance through the authorization, a candidate list and authorization list is one thing. But if simplification means in the hands of the Commission, we ban more chemicals, is a different thing. So this is not clear on the ground level what the Commission means on this. Number two, and this is, in my opinion, a very important topic, because REACH, in which we'll go through a revision, talks about chemical substances and not articles. Now, a lot of entrepreneurs tells me, what is the Commission doing? If you ban a chemical substance, but not the article, that means I'm gonna take up all my production equipment, take it to Turkey, make the same object and import into Europe with no positive effect on environment, on human health, but with a negative effect on economy and jobs. So also this one needs to be, we need to be focused on this, because we do need to look at chemical substances and do the right things about it, especially if they have a negative effect on environment and human health. But on the other hand, we need to be extremely careful on the outcome from a socioeconomic point of view, but also from a risk analysis, which is very strong in analyzing from a scientific point of view. And last but not least, but this is coming from me, not from the market, is does ECHA have the resources to go through this major change, which I forecast through the revision REACH and everything else?
Thank you. Dr. McGuinness, if you want to answer.
Thank you, and as far as I can, I think as you mentioned, Mr. Fiocchi, the term simplification and the context for the Commission is clearly for the Commission. I know in ECHA, and I think it's to be fair, if you look back, REACH was designed also to simplify, because we had many different pieces of legislation, and over the last while, there's been lots of efforts to streamline and coordinate them. And one could say, not just in the REACH context, but in the wider context, ECHA has now received quite a significant number of mandates to allow us to direct and contribute to the scientific part of different legislation, such as batteries, packaging waste, etc. So, you know, there are efforts, and I think there are positive ways we can do simplification. The other thing I would say is, you know, REACH in 2006 came in with a particular context, and a lot of the driver was in registration up until the period 2018. Now we're at a different period of time. So in a way, the modernization, the simplification of REACH, it makes sense. And I think that's, you know, from our perspective, we can see it as well. We do, you know, REACH does currently address substances in articles. We do recognize, however, though, there's challenges in that, in the context of, and we do hear it from member states and industries alike, the import of articles. Restrictions can address the import of articles in that context. So there are mechanisms already there to address the import of articles. But the challenge, I think, at the moment is that when we set up in 2007, the number of articles perhaps coming on the European market is very different. So we have to reflect the changing I suppose, external environment that chemicals and articles are dealing with in 2025 as opposed to 2006. So I think that's the challenge we have to recognize. But the quantity, not necessarily because of REACH or anything now, it's just that's the market we're now in. That's the global market that we're in. In terms of the resources, I think with all, generally, we have received resources on many of the new mandates we've received from yourselves at Parliament and Council, who've graciously identified ECHA as a positive influence in chemicals regulations. And we've often got tasks and actions during the co-decision process because of the nature of the work we've done in the past. One presumes that in the context of a future REACH revision, the Commission will look at the changes coming through and address our need for the resources and look at it in that context. But as I said earlier, REACH is our biggest part of the work we do, and it no doubt will remain part of the work, the biggest part of our work as well into the future. So we look forward to the revision when it comes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. McGuinness. So we now turn to our second session. Do you want to?
Even
Please.
a comment, most of my colleagues are, and then there is a question from our friend Silvers, but most of my colleagues have a little confusion on the managing of banning chemicals, because the Commission have different instruments. Some are through delegated acts. For example, the recent ban of lead in ammunition and fishing. Some are through the revisional classification in the CLP Regulation, which automatically have an effect both on the chemicals and the articles, for example, ethanol. And some are through the revisional REACH, in which, of course, everything is under the control of ECHA. But in any case, ECHA has a role in all these three different juridical systems to ban chemicals. But the problem, and this is something that it's our duty as politicians, is to understand that the different systems have different outcomes in terms of economy, results, jobs, and everything else, because they are really different systems, even though all three of them have the same objective, which is better environment, better health.
MEP Theodros.
First of all, I'd like to congratulate Pietro for this timely and high-level discussion we have today. My question is to Mr. Buzella, if I pronounce correctly the name.
Yes, it's correct. Thank you.
Yes, before the revision of REACH, we have the omnibus for chemicals, because we acknowledge in the European Union that we need simplification of the rules. We have all these overlapping rules, and we need to act now. Do you think that is an opportunity to reduce administrative burden before we proceed on the revision of REACH?
Sorry, I didn't catch you on the last word you said on the question, please.
About the omnibus on chemicals.
Yes.
The omnibus is a procedure for simplification of the rules and to reduce administrative burden.
Yes.
The target of Commission is by 35% for SMEs and 25% for the larger companies.
Yes, yes. Well, of course, everything that goes towards simplification is welcome from our side. As you mentioned, there are overlapping different, let's say, different regulations, and sometimes our job is not so easy. What we would like to understand is really the interest of the, let's say, of Europe to still have a strong chemical industry in this continent. We talked about chemical products. Chemicals are really the industry of the industry. We are really linked to manufacturing. Without also just few components, you cannot produce a finished product. Meanwhile, of course, if we will not have a strong manufacturing in Europe, chemical products are not required. This is the question. So every time we talk about new regulation, new legislation, we must focus at the first question. Do we still believe that the chemical industry in our continent is really to be strengthened and is a pillar of the manufacturing or not? Because sometimes I must admit that I have some doubts. Because we are focusing today with the loss of 11 million tons lost last year in production for chemical industry. And according to CFIC, future closure of big chemical complex, we are talking about 200,000 people at risk, employees, of course, I'm talking about, and we are also thinking that maybe we could arrive to 350 chemical complex to be closed. So, of course, today we're talking at REACH. We know that REACH, when started almost 20 years ago, had the aim for human health and environment, and this is, of course, our first target, no doubt. But at the same time, we must put everything on the balance. So you were talking about omnibus. Going back to your question, of course, what we have noticed that there is a sort of change in the approach, but at the same time, I would like also to underline that this is not still enough to really have a strong chemical industry in the future in this continent.
Thank you so much. Well, we now turn to our second session, which is dedicated to the CLP regulation. CLP stands for, as we know, Classification, Labeling and Packaging Regulation, and we will focus on its growing importance in defining chemical safety and market access in Europe. This panel, we will explore how reclassification processes, including substances such as ethanol, lithium, and talc, are reshaping industrial practices and risk assessment, always bearing in mind that the core of legislative action must remain the European competitiveness, and therefore every effort should be made to prevent the relocation of productive activities. So let me introduce our distinguished speakers. Mr. Hans Ingels, Head of Unit for Bioeconomy, Chemicals and Cosmetics at DG GROW, European Commission. Welcome. Dr. Michael Rosenberg, Director for Hazard Assessment at the European Chemicals Agency. And last but obviously not least, Dr. Raffaella Perrone, Director for Biocides and Cosmetics, Italian Ministry of Health. Welcome everyone. Each of you, as usual, will have about 10 minutes for his or her speech, and we'll start with Mr. Ingels for the Commission's perspective.
So, honorable members, Mr. Fiocchi, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for hosting us, and thank you for organizing this event. Why do we need a CLP? CLP regulation is a big monster of about 1,000 pages, and there's an easy answer and there's a common sense answer. The easy answer is that everyone else in the civilized world is also doing classification, labeling, and packaging of hazardous chemicals. It's laid down by the UN. There's a global harmonized system, so everybody else is doing it. That's the easy answer. But the real answer as why we have CLP is because we're a science-based society. In other words, we try to incorporate evolving science into our legislation. And we do so because we want to evolve as a society, and we want to take into account the new science, for instance, on hazardous chemicals. And this is what we're doing in CLP. But this is not the only objective. The other objectives are also to create a single market for chemicals. Because by having one single rule on hazardous chemicals for the entire single market, it facilitates lives of businesses, of entrepreneurs. because instead of 27 different rules, then plus Switzerland, plus Norway, Iceland, they've got one single rule that they will have to apply. And we also, through CLP, we try to protect human health and we try to protect the environment. And so it's important that we keep these principles into mind whenever we're discussing CLP. And people often and easily complain about CLP, but there's many benefits about CLP. I think that the majority of businesses would prefer the CLP to remain. But CLP obviously is also, and the main aspect here is the harmonized classification, which then afterwards leads then to labeling and packaging. Now, the harmonized classification process is fairly unique in Europe, and it has many advantages. The beauty of the system is that essentially businesses, authorities, and also the Commission can submit a proposal for harmonized classification to the ECHA, to the agency, with a full dossier, and that there's a science-based committee, the RAC committee, that then essentially assesses all the scientific information that it can gather. And it's also a transparent system whereby businesses, member states, and other interested parties can participate. They gather all the available science and then come to a single conclusion, an opinion about how hazardous a chemical could be. And then on that basis, and after the entire very transparent decision, the opinion-making process in ECHA, they deliver an opinion, following which then it's up to the Commission to decide, also via an expert group, taking into account the opinions of member states and industry, whether or not this opinion should be transposed into the CLP regulation, following which then there's a transition period if there's a harmonized classification. So the beauty of the system is the transparency and the fact that everybody can participate in this classification process. And the harmonized classification is also advantages for businesses, because essentially they don't need to do the hazard classification themselves. So we agree, all of us in the single market, that there's one single harmonized classification for a specific substance. This obviously has consequences. This has consequences for business in the first place, because they will have to change their labeling. They will have to put a hazard pictogram. They will have to put some warnings, signal words, hazard statements. So the labeling will have to be adapted, but that's also very useful for everybody in the supply chain, because by doing so, distributors will know precisely what's in the product, but also consumers will know precisely what's in the product and how to handle them. So in other words, by informing all the people in the supply chain, you know precisely what's in your product. You know precisely how hazardous this substance could be and which measures that you need to take to protect yourself or to protect the environment. So in other words, CLP is functioning overall very well because it's so transparent. It's not the fastest system in the world, indeed, because between the submission of the dossier to ECHA and the final delegated, the start of the application of the Delegated Act, there's few years in between. But that's necessary, because it's necessary to ensure that everybody is on board on this. So, because without the proper consultation, if it would only work based on science, nobody could deliver any input, the system would not work as well as it works now. And the evidence is there. RAC and ECHA have delivered hundreds of opinions on hazardous substances, and only 2 of them were successfully challenged at the court. So overall, you see that this is a system that's working quite well. Is the system perfect? No, it's not perfect. And for me, there are 2 reasons why it's not perfect and they're subject to improvement. First of all, some parts are simply, might be a bit too complex, and therefore we tabled a simplification omnibus, where we're trying to address a number of items that are generally considered as being too bureaucratic, too problematic, too burdensome. In that process for the simplification omnibus, we have only took those parts which are considered as very problematic by most of the people who participated in the exercise. Certain businesses asked to do much more, but as far as the Commission is concerned, we try to ensure a fair balance. The fair balance between protection of human health, protection of the environment, single market, and simplification. And if you had to make choices, and the Commission has made choices, If they had the choice to be made, we always took protection of human health and protection of the environment and single market first. But not only the complexity of CLP is the issue, and that's something that we try to address in the simplification omnibus. Also, there's another issue, is essentially the fact that the RAC committee is now very much on its plate.
Excuse me, I must ask you to conclude because we are short on time.
Okay.
Thank you.
That will be a very short 10 minutes. I'll conclude by saying that RAC is very much on its plate, and RAC also needs the resources from member states. Because and there I hope that also through the proposal on the funding regulation, we can, and then with the help of member states, we can ensure that RAC has sufficient resources to do its work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, now, Dr. Rosenberg, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dear honorable members of European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak about the CLP regulation. And I've been invited particularly to give an introduction to the CLP, but my colleague Hans already did that to some degree, but more specifically what the role of ECHA is in this. And I will also touch upon the collaborative side of our work. So how do we work together with the Commission and how do we work with the member states to achieve the objectives in this regulation? So CLP REACH was called the cornerstone. Perhaps CLP is together than the backbone. It is at least an essential part in the EU chemicals management framework. Through the CLP, the Union has defined how substances should be classified and how they are classified consistently and accurately across the EU, and labeled with appropriate hazard pictograms, signal words, and precautionary statements. CLP supports hazard communication, but also risk management, as well as regulatory coherence within the Union, contributing not only to the protection of health and the environment, but also to the level playing field and free movement of substances, mixtures, and articles within the internal market. Without the CLP, there could be differences in classification in the member states, which was to some degree the case in the previous system, leading to inconsistencies and trade barriers. And it also meant in the past a duplication of work, of efforts. And with CLP, this is now centralized and made more efficient. At ECHA, we implement the CLP regulation by managing, we have three different roles. One of this, we manage the classification and labeling inventory, which I will not go into here today. We support the harmonized classification proposals, and we provide in general scientific advice to the Commission and the member states. And I will, as said, I will focus on the latter two. So I'll walk you a bit through the process on how a harmonized classification actually, how it evolves. So in practice, ECHA receives a harmonized classification labeling proposal. We call them CLH dossiers from the member states, from the rapporteur member states. And they have prepared the substance dossiers based on the intrinsic properties of the substance. And the substances can have different uses, or they can be active substances for plant protection, for biocides, or they can be generic industrial chemicals. The data is generated following internationally agreed methodologies and quality standards, so specifically OECD standards. And industry generally is obliged to do the testing according to these standards. The data made available in the CLH dossier is a bit determined by the requirements from the sectoral legislation. So if it's a pesticide, then it will have specific information. However, a feature of the CLP is to use all available data for the classification. So when ECHA receives a dossier, we facilitate public consultations and engage with stakeholders to ensure that classification decisions are made on complete and robust scientific data, so that the assessment can be based on all available data. And then the data as such is assessed in the weight of evidence approach, where all the pieces of evidence are weighed in a scientific way. Now, a classification obviously has consequences in terms of socioeconomic impacts of downstream uses. But within the framework of the CLP, this is not taken into account. The classification, this was the first description of the first step of the process, and then once the dossier is ready and complete, then, and Hans already highlighted it, then there is the actual assessment of the information, which is done by the Risk Assessment Committee, the RAC, which ECHA hosts, so to speak. Within the RAC, there are highly qualified experts from across the EU member states, ensuring that the decisions are grounded in scientific consensus and regulatory experience within the legal framework of the CLP. So it's not science for the sake of science, it's science within a legal, regulatory context. The RAC members act independently and free from external influence, and they are screened to avoid conflict of interest, to maintain transparency and rigorously avoid undue influence. Interested parties can also attend RAC meetings and engage and are given a platform to express views, in addition to open consultations. The engagement with the stakeholders ensures the classification decisions are transparent and inclusive, and the procedures is built to strengthen trust in the system and to ensure that all voices are heard. RAC is responsible for evaluating the hazards posed by the chemical substances, and this includes assessing the potential to cause harm to health or the environment, such as carcinogenicity, mutagenicity, reproductive toxicity, and environmental persistence. As I said, the scientific assessment follows the rules for classification as stipulated in the regulation, including specific values for cutoff in some cases. At the end of the process, RAC delivers an opinion of the classification of the different hazards that the substance has, and this opinion is provided to the Commission, which takes the final decision to update or include a harmonized classification entry into the Annex 6 of the regulation. The Commission also uses the information to decide on approval or non-approval for substances in the context of biocides and pesticides. So classification is not just a technical exercise, it's one of the key pillars of chemical safety. It determines how substances are labeled and how they are handled, and how they are regulated also under other legislations. And thanks to CLP, we can inform workers, consumers, downstream users about the hazards they may face and enable authorities to take appropriate action. Industry classification label provides legal certainty and market predictability. It helps companies to understand their obligation, communicate risks, and innovate responsibly. For regulators, it provides a common standard, a way to align decisions across sectors. Now, the CLP is closely aligned with the United Nations Global Harmonized System, the GHS, but it also reflects Europe's ambition and specific needs in chemical safety. And at ECHA, we're seeing this ambition in action with, for instance, the introduction of new hazard classes for endocrine disruptors and persistence and mobile substances, or other emerging concerns. So ECHA is adapting to these developments, updating processes, enhancing our scientific capacity, improving IT tools to support the implementation of these hazard classes. Generally, which is the other role ECHA has, is to support the Commission, ensuring that the regulatory framework remains coherent, efficient, and science-based, and, for instance, contributes or supports the Commission with technical advice at the UN GHS level. As CLP continues to evolve, ECHA remains committed to the implementation. Classification is a dynamic process, one that must respond to new science, new risks, and new societal expectations. We are proud to be part and contribute to this effort, and we're looking forward to continue to work with the Commission, the Member States, and all relevant stakeholders to ensure that CLP remains a cornerstone or perhaps backbone of chemical safety in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rosenberg, for that overview of European Chemicals Agency role in hazard assessment. So let's move on with Dr. Perrone. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Pietro Fiocchi, for this event and for inviting me. I have some slides for you, a few slides, I promise. And sorry. Thank you.
We can help. Okay.
I'm here. I represent the Minister of Health, that is the competent authority for biocide regulation and for cosmetic regulation. And today I will present you some steps of the process of the biocide regulation, focusing on on the evaluation of the active ingredient. Specifically on the evaluation of, I'm interested in particular on the evaluation of the ethanol. The biocide regulation is divided into parts. The first part is the evaluation of the active ingredient, and the second part is the evaluation of the biocide products. The first part is concentrated on the evaluation of the dossier, specifically on the hazard. And then when we evaluate the dossier of the biocide product, we evaluate efficacy and risk. But we think that also in the step of the evaluation of the active ingredient, we evaluated the hazard, but we have to consider the future use of this product. For example, in ethanol, we are there is a proposal of a classification for ethanol. Gone.
Thank you.
Yeah. For example, for the proposal of classification of ethanol, the study are on an oral toxicity, in particular on abuse of ethanol. So that we think that instead, when we evaluate the active ingredient, the hazard, we have to consider the future use of this active ingredient. For example, ethanol in the future we will use only for skin disinfection. So we think it's not so correct to evaluate or to classify this active ingredient for according to studies that are only on oral toxicity and abuse in particular. Go on, please. Here I represent you all the products that fall under the biocide regulation. There are a lot of different kind of products, but today we are concentrated on the disinfection. Go on, please. Here you can see, as said Dasenberg, that there is a check of the dossier when we evaluate an active ingredient. The company apply for an authorization for a review of the active ingredient, and the evaluating competent authority propose an assessment. Then the final decision, technical decision, is in ECHA in the BPC, Biocidal Product Committee. Then there is the possibility to have a public consultation. And then at the end of all this process, the Commission will decide for inclusion or not of the active ingredient. Go on, please. This, here we can see the exclusion criteria and the candidates for substitution. The ethanol, if meet one of the exclusion criteria, will be banned from the EU market. And we think that if this evaluation is based only on oral abuse, on oral toxicity, we think that is not so correct as a classification. Go on, please. We know the importance of ethanol. Ethanol has a broad spectrum antimicrobial activity. Ethanol is highly effective against bacteria, microbacteria, viruses, and fungi, and in particular is a powerful virucidal agent with on enveloped virus and not enveloped virus. Ethanol was one of the substances used and during the pandemic period. And it was a formula proposal by WHO organization. So we think that is an important active ingredient to avoid the spread of some disease. Go on, please. Here I represent the process of the ethanol at the moment. In the evaluation competent authority is Greece. Greece proposed assessment report in 2024. Now there are a lot of discussion in the working group in ECHA. And the proposal of the classification coming from this working group is a little different from the classification of proposal by Greece. So we think that we have pay attention. Maybe we have to wait for an harmonized classification from RAC, or maybe we have to classify this active ingredient according to the future use only for skin. And even because a classification as carcinogenic could ban this active ingredient from the market. Go on, please. So I repeat, we think that it could be useful. An official decision on harmonized classification should be taken by RAC in the future. Instead, we have to, in this moment, we have to wait for the BPC classification, proposal of classification on December. And we hope that the BPC can classify this active ingredient according to the real use in BPR. To underline, I would like to present to you the use of ethanol. Ethanol is an important substance in several industrial and healthcare sectors. Ethanol during the COVID-19 pandemic was included in one of the WHO recommended formulation. Ethanol is only showing activity for both virus and overall with a less hazard profile, no acute effect on skin and on eyes, only oral toxicity. Ethanol is a key in the pharmaceutical product. Ethanol is a disinfectant used in medical device. Ethanol is used in food industry. Ethanol is important in cosmetic industries. Ethanol has a few environmental impact, and the least but not the last, ethanol is a low-cost ingredient, making it economically average for the industries. Don, thank you for the attention, and I hope to be clear on the importance of this active ingredient. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Perrone, for that detailed look at the ethanol reclassification. And you have a question. Okay.
Yes, of course I have a question. Number one, I think we should teach the Commission to communicate better, because when they say we want to ban ethanol because if you drink 1 liter of ethanol it's bad for your health, it's stupid, because also if I drink a liter of gasoline it's bad for my health, but all the chemicals have a threshold which below which it's okay, above which is bad. 20 liters of water can kill me, like 1 liter of ethanol or 1 milligram of plutonium, but we need to set the threshold in a scientific way. One of the questions I get from the field going around in Europe is they do not understand very well the system. For example, ethanol again was started by an analysis by Greece, and some of the entrepreneurs say, but you know, you have a totally different approach to different chemicals in the south of Europe and in the north of Finland. Is that okay? Are we sure they're using only scientific approach to this or not? And it's a doubt. I want to believe that they use a scientific approach. Okay. And last but not least, one of the points that Dr. Perrone brought out is very important. In the case of ethanol, it's very easy and cheap to produce. The alternatives with the same type of characteristics are produced by only 3 companies in the world and are almost 10% more, 10 times more expensive than ethanol. Do we consider also this in the picture? I shut up. Dr.
Perrone, do you want to answer or no?
I would like only to say that if there is a problem of abuse, this is not the correct way to fight it.
Thank you again. Now let's move on to our final panel, which is dedicated on one of the most debated issues in EU and more specifically in European chemical policy, PFAS. Well, these substances, as we know, have unique chemical properties, but also pose challenges for health and the environment. And as we know, the ongoing restriction proposal has officially initiated on 13 January 2023 by 5 Nordic countries, and it is currently under evaluation by European Chemicals Agency, RAC and SEAC committees. And this proposal aims to find a sort of balance between risk management and industrial feasibility. And this is the reason why it's so important to discuss this matter today. So please welcome our speakers, Mr. Paul Spate, Head of Unit for Safe and Sustainable Chemicals, DG Environment, Mr. Tommaso Dragani, CEO of Aspidia, but he also served as director of a department at the National Cancer Institute of Milan in Italy, and Mr. Jonathan Crozier, Head of Chemicals and Environment Policy at BASF. Each of you will have about five, not 10, but 5 minutes. And Mr. Spade, the floor is yours.
Okay, many thanks. And thank you very much to Mr. Fiocchi for inviting me here today, and looking very much forward to it. Let's start by a little bit to understand why did the 5 member states, or the 4 member states plus Norway, take the approach they took, yeah? So the first point is that in PFAS, there is a long history of regrettable substitution. We've been using PFAS since the 30s, but originally they were starting with PFAS, PFOA, then they moved to Generation X, then that was banned, and there's been a long chain of things which were banned, and then very similar substances were put back on the market. So this was one of the factors that led to this broad scope. The second factor is that PFAS is a very severe public health problem. We have not had a chemical pollution problem like this in the EU for years, probably since asbestos, yeah? You have not just people with PFAS in their bodies as a kind of a general concern, but people who have 500, 900 times the limit in their bodies. And you have in these PFAS hotspots, this is tens of thousands of people who have been subject to this very severe contamination, and they are all across the EU, yeah? And some of them are very well known. You know, the example of what happened in the Veneto, where you have nearly probably 3,000 people dead just from the cholesterol disruption alone. Or, you know, you look at some of the costs around what's happened near Antwerp, yeah, in the 3M plant there, where it's now costing about 800 million euro to do the cleanup. And that's not even, that's just what they are paying for. That's not even the full costs. So it's a really serious problem. So they wanted to act quickly. And of course, a smaller factor, but a third factor is they also didn't have, you know, it was clear to everyone that the fluoropolymers were part of the issue, but they didn't have any data from registration. We're talking about REACH revision before. There was no polymer data. So in a way, they had to go a bit fishing with the restriction. So this, I think, was part of the history. Now, okay, there are advantages and there are problems when you go so wide. 2 advantages, but when you have a wide scope, you can have a really comprehensive view of the full situation. And then you can have a carefully designed approach. So now the commissioner, the EVP, they have been explaining probably, we wait, of course, for the full scientific position from ECHA, but they will focus on a consumer use ban and then risk management measures for the production and essential use of PFAS. So you can have a more sophisticated approach. You can have a monitoring scheme. You can have accompanying measures outside of the restriction. You know, the Commission is now in the Chemicals Industry Action Plan. We're talking about PFAS cleanup. We're talking about investigation and so on, end of life stage. And then I guess the other advantage, now, of course, this is both an advantage and a negative at the same time, was that it did have a lot of reaction from the industry. Yeah, there was a lot of focus on substitution. A lot of research was done and a lot of progress was made quite quickly. Now, the industry will tell me also quite expensive, but still a lot happens. And now we can accompany this from the Commission by some of our efforts like the innovation and substitution hubs. So those were the advantages, but obviously the disadvantages, the first disadvantage is that it has clogged up the regulatory system. Now, this is the problem. Now we have more somehow than the ECHA committees can deal with in the time available. And this is compounded by the fact we've also had late and missing data from the industry. And this has made the restriction very slow, which is a problem. And it's also slowing down other restriction work inevitably. So that was the first disadvantage. And then the other disadvantage is had a chilling effect on investments in the EU. Yeah. So companies that needed PFAS, it was an essential use for them in some high-tech industries. They became very worried that they would not have that PFAS. And therefore, it slowed down some investments that otherwise would have been a source of jobs and GDP. So that was a problem. So I finish with, what does this mean for the future? I think it is clear no one will ever go as broad as the PFAS restriction again. Luckily, I don't think we have probably a chemical problem coming straight away. No one will go that broad. But at the same time, it's also clear we will not go back to substance by substance. The chemical industry is quicker than the regulator. You know, if you look at like brominated flame retardants, or you look at bisphenols, we could chase substance by substance over the next decades and we would never finish. So we will always need intelligent grouping. Now, of course, intelligent grouping, who defines intelligent? But this is something we are reflecting on the Commission, how to best set up these groups. And that's it. Finally, I finish with, we also need to be clearer with our communication to industry. And this is why we're working on one substance, one assessment. We had the pleasure of working with Mr. Sodras to finish that package. And I think this is very helpful to improve our predictability and to avoid duplication and so on. So there are a lot of lessons to be taken. There are some positives. We are learning, and at the same time, we are still doing. But it's a very, very important issue, and we are trying to find the best way forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Spade. And
just as information, we were just joined by Carlo Firenze, the head of the Italian delegation, very active in several commissions. So this is very positive for us because we need to have a transversal agreement how to move on this topic. Thank you, Carlo.
Thank you. Well, now let's hear from Dr. Dragani.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Fiocchi, for your invitation. And today, I would like to share a perspective that lies at the intersection of science, innovation, and policy, how to regulate PFAS in a way to protect both people and progress. The next slide. PFAS are not one compound. It's not a single chemical. They are a large family including more than 12,000 compounds. So their chemical physical properties show wide variations. And there are some that are mobile, persistent, and potentially harmful, while others are inert and essential for modern technology. So yet current regulatory proposals often treat all PFAS as if they a single chemical. So that's the core of what I call the PFAS paradox. The next slide. So the ECHA has made the most ambitious chemical restriction proposal in EU history to ban the entire PFAS class. This move is well-intentioned and motivated by the need to protect human health and the environment. But science supports protection, not indiscriminate prohibition. So a blanket ban could go beyond the evidence. In the next slide. So an indiscriminate ban could disrupt sectors that are vital for Europe's secure economy and also security. Healthcare, green technology, aerospace, and electronics. It could also force industries to replace PFAS with untested alternatives, risking both safety and performance. ensures a one-size-fits-all ban could create more problems than it solves. The next slide. Fluoropolymer, for example, are essential for medical devices, for batteries, fuel cells, space technology, and also for the army. So they operate in extreme environments where no other materials can perform as safely or reliable. So losing access to these compounds would slow down innovation in precisely the sectors that drive Europeans' green and digital transitions. Next slide. So science offers clear distinctions between harmful and harmless PFAS. Molecular size plays a key role. Compounds larger than 1,000 Dalton in molecular weight cannot pass through biological membranes. So they are not bioavailable, they cannot accumulate, and they cannot cause systemic toxicity. And this is the case of fluoropolymers. They are too large to enter the cells, which means they should not be regulated the same way as small soluble PFAS like PFOA or PFOS. Next slide. Only low molecular weight PFAS are bioavailable and potentially toxic. So high molecular weight PFAS like fluoropolymers are inert, not bioaccumulative, and not toxic. So therefore, the regulation should be specific, evidence-based, and proportional to actual risk. Next slide. So the path forward lies in balance. We need protection and innovation to work together, not against each other. Targeted risk-based regulation will safeguard health and competitiveness. At the same time, bioremediation technologies can help us deal with the legacy contamination sustainability in a sustainable way. So science-based precision, not blanket bans, should guide policy. Next slide. At Aspidia, we are developing enzyme-based and microbial technologies that prove PFAS are not forever chemicals, as they are now classified or talked about. They can be degraded biologically into harmless compounds with low cost and low carbon footprints. This is where Europe can lead by turning restriction into restoration. Next slide. So there are unintended consequences of a total ban. If we move too fast or too broadly, we risk to really not decrease in environmental contamination, since the existing PFAS will remain in the environment. But we have also economic disruption and job losses in key industries. We can stimulate increase the production abroad with weaker controls, and we can get higher emissions from importing what we use to make sustainable here. So next slide. So we need a smart regulation. A smart regulation means focusing on high-risk PFAS, setting verifiable limits on legacy compound in water, monitoring known hotspots for PFAS contaminations like airports or firefighter training sites. Also adapting non-targeted analytical methods, because if we only search for certain PFAS, we will only find those PFAS. So Europe should lead in a comprehensive science-based monitoring. Next slide. We also need phasing out non-essential and dispersive uses like in packaging, cosmetics, and cookware. But we should also invest in safer alternatives, clear fluoropolymer production, and bioremediation research. Protection, health, and preserving innovation are not opposing goals. They are two sides of a responsible regulation. In the next slide, in the conclusions, I say that the challenge of PFAS regulation is not just to reduce risk, but to do so in a smart way. So by combining sound science, smart regulation, and innovation, Europe can set a global standard of sustainable chemistry. And thank you for your attention, and I look forward to continue this conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Dragani, for underlining the disruptive consequences of a total ban, and for having underlined that there are recent advances that shedding light on potential biological solutions. So thank you so much. That's very, very important. So now let's hear from Dr. Crozier. Thank you.
I'm afraid I'm not Dr. Crozier, at least not yet. So I'm just Mr. Crozier for now. And thank you very much for the kind invitation, Mr. Fiocchi, and very warm welcome from my side to the honorable members that came this morning. So today I'd like to give you a few practical remarks from our side, from the industry. So I represent BASF, which according to many metrics is described as the largest chemical company in the world, their output. So next slide, please. So what does that mean? Let me give you a clear case. So we have our principal manufacturing site headquartered in Ludwigshafen, Germany. So this is roughly comparable in size with the island of Manhattan. This is 10 square kilometers in which you have 200 plants. They are connected to one another with a little bit less than 3,000 kilometers of pipes. I have 34,000 colleagues that work on that site every day. And it produces 6.5 million tons of chemicals that go into a lot of value chains. So for instance, fragrances, vitamins, plastics, crop protection, paints, foams. As a matter of fact, you're certainly sitting right now on a polyurethane foam, which started somewhere in one of those plants. So next slide, please. Why do we need PFAS in the chemical industry? So for instance, at BASF, we are not active in the fluorination chemistry, but we do need PFAS, and in particular fluoropolymer, to ensure our manufacturing equipment for the manufacture of many chemicals is safe and efficient. So for instance, we will find PFAS in seals, in conveyor belts, membranes. That's just a few examples of very widespread use in the apparatus that we use. Next slide, please. So for instance, one particular case is gaskets. You might ask, what is a gasket? The gasket is exactly something like this. So it's used as a seal. Maybe you can get them across. These ones are PTFE, so polytetrafluoroethylene. They are used to make sure that flange connections between pipes don't leak. This is a very important point. Maybe we can get to that on the next slide. But first, we must say that on the BASF site in Ludwigshafen, we use 2 million of those gaskets. And we go through about 240,000 annually. Next one, please. So here on the screen, you can see what a gasket looks like. It's, for instance, here, a very simple type of gasket. And you can see on the right part of the screen where it's used. So you have the two sides of the pipes, and then you need to apply pressure in between the two flanges connections to make sure that you have a perfect seal. Like I said, we use them because it provides excellent sealing properties under stress, under temperature, under acid conditions, etc. And in the Ludwigshafen site, I showed you at the beginning of my presentation, we will install every year, give or take, about 240,000 of these gaskets you can see on the picture there, the white ones. Next slide, please. So you might ask, why are you using this in the first place? What were you using before PFAS existed? I think Paul mentioned earlier on that these have been used since the 30s, and there was a chemical industry around before that. So what were people using at the time? The answer is lead, cladding, and asbestos. I'm sure you will agree that both of these are not really exactly a good case of substitution for nowadays. So here the problem, as you can see on the screen, that's because PTFE ticks a lot of boxes. So for instance, it will resist chlorine, ammonia, sulfuric acid, nitric acid, and many more. And if you consider other materials, well, it will not work. What does it mean it will not work? It means the seal will fail. So for instance, you will have a safety problem. I don't advise you to have a safety problem on a chemical compound. You will have much higher emissions, so fugitive emissions from the seal, and of course, over time, more maintenance. Let's go to the next one. I'm going to give you a clear example of what it means if you use different types of materials. So here you have 3 arrows, which represents the emissions of one single flange. So one connection between 2 pipes. If you take, for instance, a PFAS elastomer, so FKM or FFKM, it will emit 0.000115 kilogram per year. If you put a PTFE gasket, so PFAS but not elastomer, you already you will already experience fugitive emissions 10 times higher than that. And if you take a non-fluoropolymer gasket, you will have a fugitive emission of 115 grams per year for a single flange. So in other words, one flange with PTFE gaskets will emit as much fugitive emissions as 100 flanges that don't have it. So if you get rid of PFAS, your fugitive emissions on a chemical site will soar by a factor 100. That is, of course, something we don't want, and that is the very reason why we have a big problem with the proposed options. You may say there are derogations. Yes. What do you do after 13.5 years? My colleagues tell me, oh, that's great. Then we know that we have to shut down the plants in 13.5 years instead of 6.5. Unfortunately, the problem is not solved. And right now, that's just not possible to do without those gaskets to manufacture any chemical. Last slide, please. So I wanted to also give you an explanation about what happens when it comes to fluoropolymer. People often say that the problem is not in the use phase. It might be the manufacturing phase, even though nowadays there are, for instance, a lot of initiatives to tackle that aspect. But then what about the waste phase? Well, here the gaskets primarily go through incineration, 80% of those, and we are increasing the recycling for about 3% of those. And then what happens when you burn them? Well, if you burn them over 1100 Celsius, the mineralization, so the destruction of the PFAS elements, the PFAS bonds, the carbon-fluorine bonds, is considered fully effective. So here we are investing in a project, for instance, to study the incineration of those in a commercial waste incinerator. So not one that you would find on a chemical site, but rather a smaller one. So in a nutshell, my message for you today is the PFAS discussion is very, you could say, almost a religious debate, like extremely polarizing. Like a lot of people have an opinion on it. But actually, what we shouldn't forget is a very practical case. What do you do if you don't have those? Well, as of today, we don't have the answer. Thank you.
One comment, I do not agree with Dr. Dragani when they say that non-stick pans are not an essential use. I cook a lot without those. I burn the food, which is carcinogenic, by the way. So, no, more seriously, In my opinion, PFAS is a perfect example of bad communication, because the news that came to the ground was the Commission wants to ban the entire family of PFAS, which is not the truth. And I think Sharon can convince you that this is not the truth. But this throw a lot of people in the panics. And so as a European institution, we need to be better in this type of communication. And but last but not least, actually a technical question, is there any relation between the accumulation in the human body of PFAS and the accumulation of micro and nanoplastics? Are those two phenomena correlated, or they have nothing to do one with another? Thank you.
Who wants to answer?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a specific study where they're really saying what happens when you add the microplastics to the fluoropolymers. We know a little bit more about cocktail effects more generally. We've seen, combination effects of, say, endocrine disruptors on fertility. That one, I haven't seen a specific study.
Okay.
The question, sorry.
Yeah. We have gathered lots of questions for these two panels, and I would start with a questions from Claros Technologies to Mr. Jonathan Crozier, Mr. So, new technologies in the US have proven it's now technically and commercially feasible to destroy all PFAS species at industrial scale. How is BASF engaging with these emerging destruction platforms to future-proof its PFAS strategy and ensure complete elimination from industrial waste streams and compounds? This is a very good question.
It's a very good question indeed, and thank you for that. So as BASF, we are of course very much dedicated to make sure that we manufacture we monitor the emissions of the site. We are participating in several full-scale projects with our research division that is working hand in hand with the KIT. For instance, on this topic. And we are also studying, for instance, which thermal oxidizers, for instance, could be relevant on the long run. So for us, it's, let's say, a long-term commitment to make sure that we completely get a full control on the emissions from this disposal. I must also say that in terms of tonnage, that is not a very significant amount. So, for instance, for Ludwigshafen, I don't really have the tonnage, but for another site that is a bit smaller, it's 11 tons per year, and that are incinerated. So that's fully documented in terms of HF emissions, furans emissions, and PFAS 24, for instance.
Thank you very much.
Can I have an engineer question? Because the common knowledge on the ground is that PFAS can be destroyed only if you put them to 2,500 degrees and so on. In my opinion, this is a fake news, because depending also on the composition of the different PFAS. But what is your comment on this?
It's actually a good question. If you ask the people that are in this business, the key metric they will take is the mineralization of CF4. So CF4, that's the most stable PFAS there is. You take one carbon atom and it has 4 connections. You put fluorine everywhere. So you cannot have more than that. It's the most stable one. And they will look for the percentage of CF4 that is left. And if they don't see any, they will assume that all the other PFAS have been destroyed by then.
Okay.
So that's the metric that they use instead of going one by one, for instance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. As I said before, there are lots of questions for our speakers. So this one is for Paul Spade. Recent technological advancements show that it is now possible to completely destroy PFAS before they enter the wastewater stream. So is the Commission looking at these technologies as a way to address pollution while allowing for continued essential uses?
Yep, the answer is we are looking at the technological advancement, and we are also trying to sponsor some more advancement ourselves, because in the Chemical Industry Action Plan, you will have seen we're trying to set up a kind of a public-private partnership with the industry to try and improve a bit some of the technologies. And we're also looking at these innovation hubs, which is a bit the same idea. However, for the moment, this is not what's being used at scale. For the moment, what's being used at scale in the EU to remove PFAS from drinking water is expensive. It is difficult to do. You are demineralizing the water, so you're having to remineralize it afterwards. We do not want to have to do that with all our drinking water. You know, there are places in the EU where they drink their groundwater. Yeah, and if we have PFAS all in the groundwater, this is going to be super expensive. So there is a lot of technology. Luckily, there has been a lot of developments, but it's not there yet. And of course, what we shouldn't forget is because PFAS, it's been around for a long time and we were maybe a bit late to develop it, it's also in the soil. And this is what's super expensive, is trying to take it out of our soil.
Thank you, Dr. Doctor or Mr.?
Mister.
Mr. Okay, so sorry. Let's move on. I have a question from Bella Company to Mike Rosenberg. So you stated that CLP and RAC assessments support risk management decisions, but in reality, RAC almost only supports the classification decisions, not engaging in sector or application-specific risk assessment. So the RAC itself has commented multiple times that they don't have the mandate for application or use specific risk assessment. What do you think?
I think they're right. It's probably a misunderstanding. Because what
do you say?
Yeah, what I try to say is that the classification as such informs risk management. But when doing the classification, the RAC does not do risk assessment. So their feedback is correct. So I can correct if there was any misunderstanding. The classification is purely hazard driven. But once you have a classification, then you can start doing risk management with the classification. I hope this clarifies. And my apologies.
Always for you.
The question for Sharon, very important.
My co-moderator.
Yeah, yes. Sorry. No, for me it's important also to understand regarding PFAS, but regarding everything, the mandate of SEAC, or the Socioeconomic Analysis Committee. Do they have as a specific mandate the strategic part? You understand that they do economic analysis, they do job analysis, they do social analysis, so on. But what happens if the ban chemicals that then we get strategically in the hands of the Chinese or Russia or whatever? Is this also a factor, the international situation, or it's just simply a European economic and social economic analysis?
Thank you for the question. Perhaps maybe I start in two ways. One, and I always like to say this, ECHA doesn't ban anything. We're a science-based organization. And obviously, we also don't decide on our own initiative to take on a certain chemical or a group of substances. We get a mandate from the Commission, or we take what member states choose to produce, whether that's a harmonized classification, a restriction proposal, etc. And of course, we bring it through the various processes, of which the most probably well-known and most significant are our Risk Assessment Committee, RAC, and the Socioeconomic Analysis Committee, SEAC. Both of those are based on science and evidence. So facts and evidence drive the opinion at the end of the day. When you have a restriction proposal like the PFAS, it goes through RAC and they look at hazard assessment, risk assessment issues, that context. And then the Socioeconomic Analysis Committee looks at it in the context of the impacts of any of these particular proposals. What would they have in terms of socioeconomic analysis? We don't look at the strategic because that's a policy decision making. So when the final opinion goes from us to the Commission looks at the bigger, wider issues of social impacts, strategic impacts, together with the member states in council and parliament, etc. So we are not there, but obviously our opinion can inform the thinking or the views based on the evidence and facts we've generated in that regard. So as I said, not specifically strategic, but certainly helping the strategic decisions, the policy decisions that ultimately will be taken by the Commission and Parliament and Council. Thank you.
One more question for you, Dr. McGuinness. How do you evaluate the impact of a broad restriction like PFAS on the resources of ECHA and its scientific committees?
I think in the context of the nature, and I follow through on what Paul has said there, I think the challenge is for legislation, we have taken substance by substance, and that has worked in many ways, but it also means we take a long time to perhaps deal with groups of substances. And the challenge in PFAS has been putting it through a group. So when we get the proposal from the member states, and we work with them before it comes in, we work with them when it is within the process, we then have to determine the assignment of resources from our own side to support that. And we've done a lot to restructure and re-give resources into this process for bringing PFAS through. So we've put in extra resources where it's absolutely needed, when it's absolutely needed. And we've done that since the beginning. What is the challenge is that the RAC and the SEAC are not made up of ECHA resources. They come from experts nominated by member states. At the moment, they may nominate 2 people, and we're very grateful most member states aim to do that. But the reality is we have the overall number of people in these committees is 60. At the moment in RAC, we have about 51, I think, or 50 something. So, and SEAC is 31. So we are challenged in that regard and can deliver. But to be fair to those experts, they give of their time, a huge amount of time and effort. We demand 50%, and I'm sure many of them do more. And we do deliver through the processes, etc. PFAS is unusual. Let's not pretend anything otherwise. It is significant, but it is incredibly important. And it is important because of all the issues that have just been stated. And I think to be fair to everybody involved, particularly the experts in those committees, they have been working solidly to produce a very robust scientific opinion that can be used for policymakers at the end of the day. And when it comes to science, it doesn't happen overnight. Science takes time. It may not always be the answer you want, but it is based on facts and evidence. And I think it's important that we give that time. And we look forward to producing the final scientific opinion on PFAS that can ultimately inform the decisions that will be taken by Commission, Council and Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have another question from the political group The Greens to Paul Spade. Is it correct that the CLP classification of a substance leads to immediate restriction of that substance in articles? Don't hate me.
Not really, but maybe Hans, you want to, Hans is the CLP expert, so maybe you want to take that one, huh?
Thank you. Not automatically. There's only certain classifications that can lead to certain prohibitions in downstream legislation. For instance, for certain CMRs in articles that can be banned on the REACH on the entries 28 to 30 of Annex 17, for instance, but also certain CMRs can be automatically banned in the cosmetics regulation and other types of legislation. So CLP as such only determines the hazard, but then it can lead to prohibitions elsewhere.
Thank you.
A question for Sharon again. How many chemical substances ECHA is handling on average every year through the SEA crack and all the entire process? Just a curiosity to understand the number.
Thank you. Probably at a high level, we do different things, not just through the RAC or SEA committees. Roughly, our committees can take about 50 CLH harmonized classifications per year. So the RAC would do that. There's about 40 authorization applications, and anything from up to about 2 restrictions in any given year. But of course, that depends on what comes to us from member states or through mandates. But we also make decisions, and we do biocides, and we do lots of other things. And so, for example, on dossier evaluation, we might do over 200, 300 different types of evaluations of the dossier itself. So in all, there's lots of things we do and produce ourselves, but in the context of the 2 committees, RAC and SEAC, it's roughly about 100 opinions in RAC, for example.
Okay, another question for Paul Spade from Bella Company again. Are you supportive of changing the RAC mandate as to provide clear expectation that their scope shall include use sector-specific risk assessments as to enable proportional restrictions and no restrictions at all when there are no risks? Very weird question.
I think it's not the job of RAC to do that. And I think this is what we've all been saying is, there's different people play their different roles. The RAC and the SEAC, they are scientists or they're economists, and they are doing the job to give everyone, you, the co-legislators, us, the commission, the facts that we need to make the right decisions. And then in the end, it's a political judgment, right? These kind of things, these are political judgments. And the commission, when we propose a restriction, obviously, we propose something that is politically feasible, and we take account of these kind of issues. So I don't think we need to play with, the scientists, they do their job and they give us the right information. And then in the end, there is always a political part, obviously.
Okay, thank you. One more question for Hans Ingels, just to change. As we have heard, ethanol is one of the examples showing that the hazard classification system does not always work. Would the Commission consider in the future to perform socio-economic assessments on the impact of a restriction or a ban for critical substances like ethanol? Thank you.
Thank you. There are 2 parts of the answer. The first part is on the CLP. Again, CLP and the classification process in CLP is only to determine the hazard. So in other words, this is a scientific evidence-based process. And then the next step is, but it's outside CLP, is how you do the risk management. So you determine the hazards. This is done on the CLP, then you take exposure, and then you come up to risk management. And this is done in other legislation. It's done, for instance, in REACH, and REACH is the model for all chemical legislation, but it can all happen elsewhere. And this risk management is always decided, as Paul already said, in consensus with industry and with member states. So it's not a commission on its own, but this is always going to a committee of member states, where then these representatives decide on which risk management is appropriate, which elements have to be taken into account in function of exposure. And then afterwards, it's very often also sent to the Parliament and the Council for scrutiny. So there's a general open process in this entire risk management. But at the moment on the CLP, we don't foresee any involvement of SEAC at the moment, because it's a scientific decision or scientific opinion about hazards as such.
Thank you so much. Dr. McGuinness, do you want to add something?
I think just to add, obviously, just in case there's confusion, the current ethanol work is done under biocidal products regulation. It hasn't come through the classification and labeling or packaging discussion yet. But when you look at it in the context of biocidal products, it is using the same criteria as in classification. So that allows that overlap. But as I said, in the biocides, not only are they looking at hazard in a general sense, but they're then looking at a bit of the socioeconomic impact, etc., which then would go to the Commission for the decision whether some active ingredient is going to be authorized for use on the market. It should, and in general, and I think my colleague Mike had mentioned it as well, in general, harmonized classification within the RAC is done for all biocides generally and for pesticides. So at some stage it will come back into the harmonized classification system. But right now it's within biocidal products context only. And that doesn't mean anything other than its use in a biocide. So it's not about whether you're going to drink it or use it or have it as an industry. It's a biocidal use we're talking about here. And I think perhaps to reflect on a point about, let's be careful how we say things, because things can take legs and run before we're very clear. And this is ideas about total bans or issues. We are looking at things, we're very measured. We don't jump into things. We take science and evidence factually and we bring it forward. So there's no knee-jerk reactions by us in the context of what we're doing. It's very much measured and science-based. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Fiocchi?
I have one question, because also that is quite confusing for us normal people. For example, the banning of lead in ammunition and fishing. And I'm interested, of course, because I'm both a hunter and a fisherman, but through delegated acts. Now, the discussion, personal opinion, delegated acts are not a very good idea because you bypass the parliament and forget about democracy. But then they go through the discussion in comitology. Does ECHA has any role in that, even as an advisor, or the comitology is just doing whatever they want in their own way? And this is more, for, I guess, for the Commission to ask why every country decide what type of expert to send. Because, for example, again, on banning of lead in ammunition and fishing, some countries sent representative of the Ministry of Industry, some from the Health Ministry, some from the environmental industry. And the situation is quite chaotic to understand what are the positions.
Yeah, on that one, I mean, it's really the member state prerogatives. They send the expert that they want to send. Sometimes it's even the Labour Ministry as well. So it's, yeah, it's arranged. It's really the history of how chemicals were regulated in that country. But I think, you know, that most member states now, the coordination is good. You know, they take very careful positions. And of course, we're very careful in the Commission when we come forward with these things. You know, we listen very carefully what comes, of course, the science, but also what comes from the member states. Because in the end, as you say, they need to, if they don't vote for it, then it doesn't go through well.
Thank you. One last question, I promise. For Dr. McGuinness, are there any point of friction in the interaction between the industry and ECHA?
Of course. Sorry, it wouldn't be REACH and it wouldn't be regulation if we didn't have points of friction. That's the whole point. Having done this for 30 odd years, nothing surprises me anymore because everybody has their positions. I do think, though, it's healthy because if we all agreed, there'd be nothing to do in a way. And I do think it's important, and it's the reason we emphasize collaboration, is if we don't hear the different views, we won't be able to come up with the solutions to what are some significant issues here in Europe. Significant in that we need protection of health and the environment. There are clearly problems there. But we also need to ensure that we do have an industry here in Europe. Nobody wants to see it go, but we want to make sure it is able to sustain itself in the right way to protect not only the citizens' health and the environment, its workers, but its market as well. And I think that's what we're here about. So, as I said, happy to have those discussions and differences of views. I would say we have them also on the other side. So there's no problem there. And we look forward to the dialogue in the coming months when we all work, I hope, for a REACH that will work for what it was fully intended, which is protecting health and the environment and ensuring competitiveness innovation for all of us here in Europe too. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for this engaging exchange. We are waiting for Jessica Rosewall, Commissioner. That's right. Well, clearly the dialogue between policymakers, institutions, regulators, and industry remains essential for progress, as we all know. And let me say that it's very interesting to see such a constructive spirit and shared commitment to sustainable solution, even on issues as complex as chemical regulation. So thank you all. I'd like to warmly thank you to all our speakers and participants for their valuable contribution today. I think we have covered lots of ground, from the evolution of REACH and CLP to the future of PFAS regulation, and it's evident that cooperation between institutions and industry is key to achieving both safety and competitiveness in Europe. So it's now my pleasure to invite MEP Pietro Fiocchi to deliver his closing remarks as we await the Commissioner.
But, we Europeans live in very difficult times. We have wars on our borders. We have a strategic dependence on key raw material, lithium, cobalt, tungsten, and so on. We have a strategic dependence on key manufacturers. Microchips comes to mind. We have raising cost of energy, raising cost of transport, raising age of population. I guess it's more Italy than the rest of Europe, but we do have a raising age of population. Strong immigration pressure, which will grow even more in the future years. And I could go on. And on top of this difficult situation, we also have a potential, if we do not do the right thing, economic recession, due to some of the most stringent regulation in the planet, most of the times applied only to the European producers and not to the importers. So I could do a simple example because I ran through it 1 week ago in the south of Milan. The corn coming from Canada, which they use 2.5 times the pesticides that we can use in Italy, traveling 7,000 kilometers by truck and ship, emitting CO2, showed up in the north of Italy at a lower price than the local production using less pesticides. So this is kind of stupid, and of course I'm not criticizing ECHA, Sharon, I'm criticizing the politics here. So I'm criticizing myself, okay? But this is very, very, very important. And, we heard here constantly, as we heard today from the stakeholders, all the concerns that we need to take into account this when drafting and approving the various pieces of legislation. And this is a duty I took upon myself because as I got the role of a shadow rapporteur in the Omnibus 6 to go in the direction of what comes from the industry, from the stakeholders, simplification is the key. Now, we all agree that the environment is, or should be, the top priority of the planet. Also, but not only for the negative effect of the human health. So this is a really key topic. But we cannot forget that when we take a decision in Europe, there is also the economy, the jobs, the strategic issue, the potential dependence from uncontrollable countries, Russia, China, and so on. So in this difficult situation, I do believe that politics should also improve the relationship between ECHA and the industry. And of course, we should improve also the relationship between politics and ECHA. This is my personal comment, okay? Because I can only imagine the pressure that politics put on ECHA. You know, there is one side. Oh, fantastic.
She's just
Thank you.
okay. I give you the floor. Jessica Rosewall, Commissioner for Environment.
Thank you very much. Thank you, dear Pietro. You don't know how much he have contacted me to be here. So of course I would like to be here. And also nice to meet you again, Sharon, even though it's close. Colleagues and friends, let me start with saying that this is a political priority. So it's not only because of Piotr Fiocchi that I'm here, it's also because I think it's a political priority.
Yes.
For the European Commission and also for me personally. Many of you maybe have heard me saying that we must discuss these questions more loudly and also more often. And as a mother and grandmother, I really care about this. As a commissioner who have visited a lot of polluted sites across Europe, I also meet a lot of concerned citizens. I also hear a clear challenge that we face in the society when it comes to handling and managing chemicals. But I also meet scientists who are conducting cutting-edge research, and I also meet businesses who are eager to translate new innovations into sustainable business models. And this is actually something that gives me hope. I think that we need to keep all in mind this when we discuss the next steps of European regulation. I'm also very grateful to you, Pietro, that you are organizing this important discussion on how we can modernize EU chemical safety rules. Today, European chemical sector faces both opportunities and challenges. The sector is, as you all know, a very important part of our total economy. It's a vital player when it comes to green and digital transition. And it needs to innovate and it needs to compete while also being aware of the impact it has on the world. As you know, that one of the missions I have as a commissioner is to deliver a revision of the REACH. And this is something that I'm working hard on together with the EVP Sejourné. Since 2006, REACH has been instrumental to protection of our health and the environment. You know this. It has served as a flexible and robust tool to inform the decision maker, stakeholders, and citizens about hazardous chemicals. It also it's been copied around the world, which makes us very proud. But to be honest, and I suppose that is something that you've been discussed, it's not perfect. And we can all see the shortcomings. Slow and burdensome procedures, the inability to prevent the PFAS crisis, gaps in addressing endocrine disruptors, and also insufficient information for the authorities on various hazards, including polymers. So REACH clearly needs to simplify and modernize. We will simplify the system of authorization and restrictions. And this means that with fewer individual authorizations and more broad restrictions with higher predictability for businesses. Decisions will come faster without lowering the protection for people and the nature. Today, we simply don't have enough data. So we want to improve the information we get during registration, especially about harmful effects like endocrine disruptions. We will also strengthen enforcement and border controls on imports. That means also coordination, increase the coordination between member states. So, ladies and gentlemen, the REACH is essential. We are working hard to get there. Collaboration is key. ECHA is important in this process. I'm very glad to have you here also today. And I've visited ECHA in Helsinki for a couple of, I don't remember, very recently. I was really impressed on the hard work that you are doing. I know I push you also to work harder, but I'm very happy that you have all this expertise and the team that you have to bring forward this process. Of course, cooperation means also cooperation with the European Parliament. You play an important fundamental role, and it's my true belief that we cannot deliver the changes that we need if we don't work together. So honestly, I also would like to say and end with this, that the work is not easy, but we need to do better, and we need the Parliament to be active and join me and others to pushing for a better management of chemicals. So I'm very happy that I shortly could be here, and I'm very happy that this förmiddag in Swedish, I lost my word, this morning you have had these discussions. So thank you very much for that, Pietro.
Jessica, I'm so happy you could make it here, even with your busy schedule, that I will forgive you for having killed my touching speech in the middle. No, I'm joking. I have to say, Commissioner Roswell is extremely open to discussion and great collaboration, at least for what I can say by myself. She always answers to my question, and she always acts on the real things. So I really appreciate her role, and I wish all the commissioner would be like her. But
Thank you.
So thank you very much, Jessica, for being here.
Sorry for that. Thank you. And with that, we conclude today's event. No, we don't conclude.
No, I have to finish my touching speech.
Well, we conclude.
No, again, we were talking about politics in ECHA. So I can only imagine, and probably Sharon McGuinness can testify on that. No, maybe she will not because she's too scientific, but the pressure the politics put on ECHA. You know, there are some of my colleagues that say, "Oh, ban everything." There are some other of my colleagues that say, "No, do not ban anything." So I can imagine the pressure for politics. But I do believe, and I visited ECHA a couple of times, and I stayed there. I talked to all the people that they do have an extremely strong scientific approach. So from this point of view, I have to say that I have absolutely no problem with ECHA. They're very open, they're very scientific approach, and so on. But one of the things, and here I will criticize my colleagues, most of my colleagues do not understand, thank you, Jessica, again. Most of my colleagues do not understand ECHA, do not understand REACH, do not understand how the system works. And when I say most, I'm saying 98% of my colleagues. Because if you make any question to my colleagues, most of the time they answer wrongly. So it is extremely important that we spread the news. We teach my colleagues how ECHA and REACH function, how SEAC and RAC function, because this is the base for better regulation. And better regulation is not just a stupid name. It is what Europe, and it's our moral duty to do if we want to go in the right direction in Europe. Better regulation. Okay. Now, obviously, the goal for Europe is to find a pragmatic approach to chemicals. If they're dangerous to the environment or to human health, they need to be banned. Period. Provided that we give the necessary time to find an alternative, and provided we do not destroy the European economy and all the related jobs. So very difficult balancing act, but a very pragmatic approach. In my opinion, and this is my last personal comment, we cannot afford, as inhabitants of this planet, that Europe, losing its economic role, its economic power, loses also its chances to convince the rest of the planet to follow our lead. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to especially Director McGuinness and everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you.